There are moments in life that freeze you. Not because of a sudden crash or a sharp pain, but because of a single, soft sentence delivered with a casual indifference that tells you, instantly, that the world you built has just collapsed. For me, that moment didn't come with a scream or a fight. It came with 5 simple words, spoken by a woman I had welcomed into my heart as a daughter. I remember that morning so clearly. The sun was streaming into the kitchen, warming the air just enough to feel hopeful. I was making my famous lemon scones, the ones my son, Marcus, had loved since he was a boy. Every time I made them, it was an act of pure, distilled love. And that morning, I was making them for an occasion I'd been dreaming of for years, the planning of his wedding. Marcus had met Chloe 3 years ago. From the moment he introduced her, I was charmed. She was bright, focused, and she looked at my son with a devotion that made my mother's heart swell with gratitude. Finally, I thought, he has found his person. They were a beautiful couple. They moved in together 6 months ago. We talked about wedding themes, guest lists, and venues for almost 2 years. We discussed the kind of simple, elegant ceremony Marcus always wanted, something outdoors, perhaps near the coast, with a small gathering of close family. I kept a little notebook, the kind with a velvet cover, filled with clippings of dresses and handwritten notes about flower arrangements. This book wasn't just a collection of ideas, it was a blueprint for the future. It represented my hope for Marcus's lasting happiness, and my place in the beautiful, expanding life of my family. I never interfered, I just offered excitement, support, and my savings. Every mother dreams of celebrating her child's greatest joy, and I was no different. I had set aside a significant amount of money, enough to cover the entire event, from the dress to the catering. This was my gift, my contribution to their beginning. Over the past few months, the conversations had gotten more serious. Marcus and Chloe were saving for a house deposit, and they both acknowledged that they wouldn't be able to afford the wedding they truly wanted without my help. I was proud to give it. It wasn't a burden, it was an honor. I asked them every week, sometimes twice a week, have you set a date? Have you booked the hall? Should we look at my contacts for the photographer? I was excited. A little overly eager, maybe, but excited nonetheless. Chloe always smiled, that sweet, slightly reserved smile that made her seem so gentle, and she would say, "Not yet, Elena. We're waiting for the right moment. We'll tell you the minute we have the date locked in." Marcus would just nod, his eyes maybe a little too quick to dart away, but I dismissed it as typical young man nervousness about commitment. On that particular morning, I had invited them over for breakfast. The kitchen smelled incredible. The scones were cooling on the rack, and I had poured 3 cups of freshly brewed coffee. They walked in, Chloe looking impeccable as always in a cream sweater, Marcus a little tired, but smiling. "These smell heavenly, Elena," Chloe said, giving me a quick hug. We sat down, the conversation starting light, work gossip, a funny story about the neighbor's dog. But I couldn't hold back the question that was always burning inside me. I put my coffee cup down, leaned forward, and let the anticipation fill my voice. "All right, enough small talk," I said, my smile wide. "It's time. I need to know. When is the wedding? We need to start sending out the save the dates if we want the venue we discussed." I fully expected to hear a month, maybe next September, perhaps spring. I expected cheers, perhaps a little blush from Chloe, maybe a happy sigh from Marcus. Instead, Chloe took a slow, deliberate sip of her coffee. She looked directly at me, her expression completely flat, devoid of any celebration, any joy, or any apology. And then she delivered the words that shattered the quiet morning and broke my mother's heart into a million irreparable pieces. "We married yesterday." The air left my lungs in a rush. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. It wasn't a joke. Her eyes, those pretty brown eyes I had trusted, were entirely serious. They weren't just saying we are married, they were saying, we did this without you. They were saying, you were not important enough. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. It was the sound of a dream dying right there on my kitchen table, lying next to the lemon scones I baked out of love. I looked from Chloe to Marcus. He wouldn't meet my gaze. He was staring intensely at the steam rising from his coffee cup, his shoulders hunched, his silence a crushing confirmation of his wife's brutal declaration. He had known. He had participated. This was not a simple elopement. This was an exclusion, a dismissal of everything I was to them, and everything I had offered. The love, the excitement, the financial sacrifice, the velvet notebook, all of it meant nothing. It was all a pretense while they moved forward with their lives, completely cutting me out of the most significant day of my son's journey. It was more than just a secret, it was a profound, calculated betrayal, delivered like a casual footnote over a Saturday breakfast. My mind reeled, trying to grasp the why. Why the endless planning talk? Why the false hopes? Why the lies? The sheer audacity of the secret was staggering, but the chilling casualness of the reveal was what truly began to crack the foundation of my trust. The pain was immediate, sharp, and quickly turned into a cold, hard knot of confusion and a terrifying sense of being utterly disrespected. My voice, when it finally emerged, was a whisper that felt like a scream in my chest. Yesterday? You got married, yesterday? I repeated, trying to process the timeline of their deceit. They had been in my home 2 days before, discussing hypothetical flower arrangements for a wedding they already had planned behind my back. Chloe simply nodded, a slight, almost lazy movement of her head. Marcus remained silent, still looking away. At that moment, I knew this wasn't just Chloe's doing. This was them. And the sting of my own son's complicity was a wound that went deeper than anything Chloe could have inflicted on her own. The true conflict had just begun, and it wasn't about a wedding, it was about the core of loyalty and the devastating realization that I was utterly alone in my understanding of my own family. My immediate reaction wasn't rage. It was a searing, physical coldness that started in my chest and spread, numbing every coherent thought. I was sitting at my own kitchen table, but I felt as if I had been teleported to a desolate, empty room. I finally managed to speak, my voice sounding strained and unfamiliar. Why? Why the secrecy, Chloe? Why tell me now, so casually? And Marcus, I turned to my son, the disappointment in my eyes surely mirrored in the trembling of my voice. Why didn't you say anything? Why let me continue planning? Chloe was the one who answered, and her answer was delivered with a kind of patronizing softness that was far more infuriating than any shouted defense. Elena, please don't be dramatic. We did it the way we wanted. We had a small, private ceremony at the courthouse. It was simple. Marcus and I just we felt it was too much pressure, all the fuss. You were getting so invested. Invested. She used the word as if my love and financial support were some sort of invasive nuisance. The pain sharpened into a clear, cutting anger. Pressure? I was offering you the wedding of your dreams, a gift, Chloe. I dedicated weeks, months, to helping you both plan. And the money, I said, leaning back, the image of my velvet notebook flashing in my mind. What about the money I set aside? The money I was going to give you? She waved a dismissive hand. Oh, we knew. But we decided that money would be much better spent on the down payment for the house. We need that more than a party. It was a practical decision, Elena. A practical decision. That was the perfect, icy veneer they had constructed to cover the ugliness of their deception. They weren't just saving money, they were actively misleading me, allowing me to pour my emotional energy and my future savings into a ghost event, knowing all along they had an alternative, secretive plan. Marcus finally spoke, his gaze still fixed on his coffee cup, his voice mumbled and weak. Mom, please. Chloe is right. It just felt like too much of a production. We wanted something simple. We didn't want the spectacle. We thought you would be upset if we canceled everything. Upset? I nearly choked on the word. Upset about canceling a party? I am your mother, Marcus. I am upset that you went through the most important ceremony of your life and consciously excluded me. I'm upset that you let me sit here, pouring coffee and talking about flower arrangements for a wedding that had already happened. The rising conflict wasn't just about the wedding itself, it was about the months of performance. I started mentally reviewing every conversation we had, every detail I was given, every time Chloe would smile and say, "Almost there, Elena." I remembered the time 3 weeks prior when I had excitedly called Chloe, telling her I had an appointment with a caterer who specialized in gluten-free options, knowing Marcus had a sensitivity. Chloe had listened patiently, even sounding grateful, and told me to send over the menu options. She was already married then. She was already Marcus's wife, and she sat there, on the phone, discussing canapés with a woman she had consciously chosen to exclude from her life's commitment. It wasn't just a lie of omission, it was a perfect, continuous act of deception. They had been performing the role of the engaged couple for my benefit, perhaps to keep the promise of the financial gift alive, or perhaps simply to keep the peace while executing their secretive plan. They maintained the facade of happiness, my happiness, while hiding the deep, dark truth beneath the surface. This realization ignited a cold fury that pushed the sadness aside. I realized they saw me not as a mother or a supporter, but as a resource they needed to manage and deceive. They thought they could use my love as a cushion to land on, then discard my feelings the moment their needs were met. So, where was this simple ceremony? I asked, my voice now steady, dangerously calm. Who was there? Did anyone you know attend? Chloe, perhaps sensing the shift in my tone from hurt to inquiry, became defensive. It was just a couple of friends. 2 witnesses. That's all. We wanted it quiet. We signed the papers. It was perfect. A perfect secret, I corrected her, the calmness of my voice chilling even to my own ears. A perfect secret kept from the woman who raised your husband, who loved you, and who has given you everything. And I suppose those couple of friends were perfectly sworn to silence, weren't they? Marcus finally lifted his eyes. They were filled with exhaustion, not guilt. That hurt the most. He was tired of having to keep the secret, not remorseful about the pain he had inflicted. Mom, it wasn't meant to hurt you. It just happened fast. We saw an opening at the courthouse, and we took it, he pleaded, the old excuse of "it just happened" sounding utterly hollow. It takes weeks to plan a courthouse wedding, Marcus, I countered, laying out the basic facts of their lie. You need licenses, you need witnesses, you need an application period. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. It was a choice to exclude me. And that is what I cannot forgive. The rising conflict was now fully established. It wasn't about the ceremony, it was a fundamental rift in our relationship, built on broken trust and profound disrespect. I stood up, pushing my chair back slowly. The lemon scones on the counter suddenly looked repulsive. They were a symbol of the pure, open love I had offered, which had been met with calculated deceit. I think you need to leave, I said, my focus now entirely on Marcus. Both of you. Right now. Chloe attempted one last manipulative maneuver. Elena, don't do this. We're still family. We're still going to have the big party next year, like a renewal of vows, and you can organize that. I cut her off with a sharp look that silenced her instantly. The fact that you think a redo party can fix this shows exactly how little you value my feelings, or the meaning of a true commitment. There is no party. There is only the fact that you lied to me for months. And now, you need to go. Marcus got up quickly, pulling Chloe toward the door. As they left, Chloe glanced back, and for the first time, I saw something flicker in her eyes that wasn't charm or indifference. It was a flash of something hard, a confirmation that she understood the line had been crossed, and that she was not sorry, only exposed. The door clicked shut, leaving me standing alone in the quiet kitchen. My hands were shaking. I had spent years dreaming of this day, of this partnership, and in a single, callous conversation, they had not only taken the joy away but had destroyed the basic foundation of my belief in them. I walked over to the velvet notebook, the blueprint for a beautiful future. I picked it up, feeling the soft texture of the cover, and then, with a heavy heart, I dropped it straight into the kitchen trash can. The perfect lie had been exposed, and now, the cold determination for justice, or rather, a proportionate response to this stunning betrayal, was starting to take root deep in my wounded heart. They left me in the wreckage of my own kitchen. The silence they left behind was not peaceful, it was deafening, echoing with the sound of every kind word I had ever said to Chloe, and every lie they had fed me. I didn't cry. The tears were frozen inside me, replaced by a cold, surgical clarity. When love is betrayed so fundamentally, it doesn't turn into sorrow right away, it turns into a relentless need for answers. I needed to know the details of their deceit. Their version, the simple courthouse signing, the impromptu timing, was flimsy. I knew, intuitively, that there was a deeper, uglier truth hidden beneath their vague excuses. I needed proof, not just for my own shattered sanity, but because if I was going to move forward, I needed to understand the full scope of their disrespect. I started where most secrets leak out, online. Marcus was careless on social media. He rarely posted, but he was tagged frequently. I knew the names of the two friends Chloe mentioned, Liam and Sarah, a couple they saw occasionally. Within minutes, I was on Sarah's profile. She had recently locked it down, but not before my fingers, shaking slightly, found a link she had carelessly posted on an old, public thread. It led to an album of photos she had set to friends only, but the title of the album was still visible. It was titled, Marcus and Chloe's Coastal Celebration, 10/14/XX. The date was exactly 2 days before Chloe had stood in my kitchen discussing hypothetical wedding cakes. My blood ran cold, but the clarity I sought was starting to illuminate the darkness. This wasn't a courthouse signing. This was a celebration. And the name of the album strongly suggested it wasn't a secret from everyone. I immediately knew what I had to do. I have always been a private person, but in a crisis, I become meticulous. I remembered Marcus had once shared his laptop password with me years ago, a silly code based on our old dog's name. I prayed he hadn't changed it. I drove straight to his house. They were gone, likely back at work, thinking the difficult confrontation was over and I would eventually just get over it. They left a key under the mat, the ultimate symbol of their false sense of security. Inside, I went directly to Marcus's home office. The laptop was sitting there. I typed in the old password. Access granted. The speed at which I worked was driven by adrenaline and the icy sting of my broken heart. I navigated through his files until I found a folder titled innocuously, Tax Docs. Inside, nestled among actual financial papers, was another, hidden folder. What I found in there was not a simple registry receipt. It was a complete, digital trail of their deception. A dozen professional photographs from their wedding. It wasn't a quick courthouse trip. It was a beautiful, small, but clearly expensive ceremony held on the coastline they knew I loved, complete with a professional photographer, an elegant white dress, and a catering setup. The photos showed Chloe laughing, her eyes shining, a genuine happiness I hadn't seen in months, because she had been busy pretending for me. The invoice from the venue. It was a small, high-end private rental, a place they had booked 6 months ago. 6 months they had been planning this, 6 months they had let me believe they were waiting, hoping, saving. The guest list. It was small, 25 people. And every single person on that list was a mutual friend, a coworker, or a distant relative who had clearly been sworn to secrecy. My sister, their aunt, was not on that list. His best man, Liam, was clearly visible, beaming in the photos. The photos were the sharpest blow. I saw Chloe in her beautiful dress, standing beside Marcus, who looked relieved, happy, and utterly complicit. They weren't just married, they were joyfully, privately celebrating a new life built on a foundation of my deliberate exclusion. As I scrolled through the images, the sadness evaporated completely, replaced by a deep, powerful current of anger and the urgent need for justice. They hadn't just slighted me, they had systematically lied to me while accepting my emotional and potential financial investment. They had calculated the necessary level of deceit to keep me subdued until the act was done. I didn't steal the photos. I didn't need physical evidence yet. I simply took my phone and carefully photographed the key documents and selected images, creating an undeniable, timestamped digital record of their comprehensive deception. The rising conflict wasn't internal anymore, it was now an established truth. I saw the dates. The details. I saw the pure audacity of their lie. They didn't want the spectacle, they claimed? No. They didn't want me. They didn't want my input, my presence, or my role as the mother who had always been there. They wanted a life where they could dictate the terms, use my resources, and then discard my feelings when convenient. This digital revelation was the final turning point. I walked out of their house, carefully replacing the key under the mat, no longer the weeping, confused mother. I was Elena, a woman who had been thoroughly disrespected and now possessed undeniable proof of a calculated betrayal. The velvet notebook had been thrown away, but now, a much more dangerous blueprint was taking shape in my mind, a plan rooted not in vengeance for the wedding, but in the need to expose the integrity of the people who were now legally bound to my son. The true meaning of betrayal is not just the lie, but the cold, calculating effort required to maintain it. And they had mastered that art. It was time for me to teach them a lesson about the real cost of deceit. The quiet period of grief was over. The period of retribution was about to begin. I had my proof. The photographs, the invoices, the timeline, the digital truth was far harsher than their clumsy lie. It confirmed what my heart already knew: this was not a lapse in judgment, it was a campaign of deceit. Now, I needed to deliver the verdict. I didn't call them. I didn't send a text. I needed to see their faces when the perfect facade they had so carefully constructed crumbled beneath the weight of their own evidence. I simply texted Marcus, "Dinner tonight. My house. 7 p.m. Just the three of us. We need to talk about the house deposit." The mention of the money was intentional. It was the last thread of leverage I had, and I knew it would guarantee their presence. They arrived exactly at 7 p.m., radiating in nervous confidence. They probably expected a tearful, pleading mother who, after a few days, would forgive them to keep the peace. They mistook my silence for submission. I had prepared a meal, a favorite of Marcus's, ironically, but I didn't touch it. The table was set for 3, but it felt like a trial. "Elena, thank you for inviting us," Chloe began, her voice overly warm, already attempting to smooth things over. "Look, we know we handled this badly, but we really are so happy, and we just want to move past it. We need to talk about the house, as you said." Marcus nodded quickly, looking relieved that I was willing to talk finance instead of feelings. "Yeah, Mom. We found a great place. If we can get that money soon, we can put in the offer." I looked at them, sitting there, brazenly discussing taking my savings after lying to my face for 6 months. I felt a cold, hard resolve settle in my bones. The time for niceties was over. "I won't be giving you any money for a house deposit," I stated, my voice low and steady, allowing no room for negotiation. The air immediately went still. Chloe's carefully constructed smile vanished. Marcus's face fell. What?" Marcus stammered. "Mom, you promised. You said you had the money set aside for the wedding, and since there was no wedding—" "Oh, but there was a wedding, Marcus," I interrupted, leaning forward. "There was a beautiful, planned ceremony. You just decided I wasn't allowed to be there." Chloe's eyes narrowed, sensing the shift from sadness to confrontation. "Elena, we already explained. It was a simple courthouse." I cut her off sharply, pulling my phone out and placing it flat on the table, displaying the first image, a crystal-clear, professionally taken photograph of Chloe in her elegant white dress, Marcus beaming, standing before a beautiful coastal backdrop. The image hit them like a physical blow. They both stared at the phone screen, their mouths slightly agape. All pretense of this simple courthouse vanishing in that instant. Is this your simple courthouse ceremony, Chloe? I asked, my voice cutting through the silence. This beautiful, expensive event, complete with a professional photographer? A coastal celebration that you planned for 6 months while I was sitting here, discussing flowers and sending out caterer recommendations? Marcus finally found his voice, high-pitched with panic. Where did you get that? It doesn't matter how I got it, Marcus, I countered. What matters is what this photograph confirms. It confirms that you didn't just elope spontaneously. It confirms that you consciously, calculatedly, and systematically excluded me from the most important day of your life while lying to me about your planning to ensure I stayed quiet and ready to write a large check. I scrolled to the next image, the invoice for the venue rental, dated half a year ago. 6 months, Chloe. 6 months of pretending to be my future daughter-in-law, letting me pour my heart and my hope into a wedding that you knew would never happen. You stood in my kitchen and discussed the perfect moment to tell me the date, and you already knew the date was in the past. Chloe was recovering faster than Marcus. Her eyes were hard, and the fake sweetness was gone, replaced by a cold defensiveness. So what? It was our choice. We didn't want the fuss. We didn't want the stress. We wanted to start our life without interference. Interference? I almost laughed, the sound hollow. No, you didn't want to start your life without money. You wanted the money, but not the mother. You wanted the financial reward of being my son's wife, without the responsibility of being decent to his family. The real core of the betrayal, the transactional nature of their deceit, was now fully unveiled. They weren't just selfish, they were manipulative. Marcus buried his head in his hands, completely overwhelmed, and it was his silence that truly solidified my resolve. His complicity was the worst betrayal. And Marcus, I said, my voice softening just enough to inflict maximum pain, you let her do this. You let your own mother sit here and dream, knowing every week that you had already exchanged vows. You traded my trust for a clean, easy wedding. You sacrificed the truth to avoid a difficult conversation. And for that, the consequences will be severe. I picked up my phone and opened a file, the saved bank statement from the account where my wedding funds were held. I placed it on the table. This is the account that held the money I set aside for your beautiful, imaginary wedding, I stated. As of 2 days ago, that money has been removed. Every single cent. Their heads snapped up simultaneously, a unified expression of panic and entitlement washing over their faces. Where is it? Chloe demanded, her voice losing its controlled calm. It is exactly where I decided it would be most useful, I replied, standing up, the image of their wedding still glowing on the table between us. It is paying for something that will bring me great comfort and security. Something you two made me realize I sorely need, my own investment in my own future. You taught me that I cannot rely on the loyalty of my family, so I must rely on myself. The betrayal was complete. They hadn't just been unveiled, they had been stripped of their financial motive. They sat there, looking at the evidence of their secretive joy and the proof of their subsequent loss. The quiet confrontation had escalated into a dramatic, public-facing trauma, not physically, but emotionally. They had chosen secrecy and deceit over loyalty and respect. Now, they would face the consequences of having sacrificed their most important relationships for a cheap, momentary convenience. The game of lies was over, and the phase of reckoning was about to begin. When the door slammed behind Marcus and Chloe, the fury that had sustained me through the confrontation instantly evaporated. What remained was a crushing, overwhelming void. The betrayal was no longer just a secret, it was a loud, ugly truth that had officially destroyed the relationship with my son. I sank onto the sofa, the meticulously set dinner table a cruel reminder of the family meal that would never be. I had won the battle of the confrontation, but I had lost the war for my family's honesty. The knowledge that they valued my money more than my emotional connection was a kind of rejection that cut deeper than any insult. It wasn't the lie itself that was so devastating, it was the crushing weight of being considered disposable. I had given them my unconditional love, and in return, they had treated me like an ATM they could manipulate until the funds ran dry. For 2 days, I existed in a fog of profound grief. I didn't answer calls. I didn't open the blinds. I simply sat, turning over every interaction in my head, analyzing the subtle glances, the quick subject changes, the small, seemingly insignificant details where the truth had been hiding in plain sight. The hardest truth to swallow was my son's complicity. Chloe's deceit was painful, but Marcus's betrayal felt like a piece of my own soul had been severed. He was the child I had raised with every ounce of my effort, and he had actively participated in my emotional isolation. He hadn't just stood by, he had been the co-pilot in the deception. The turning point came when I received a barrage of frantic, almost hysterical texts from Chloe. They weren't apologies, they were demands. "Elena, we need to talk about the money. You can't just take it. That was promised. It's theft. This is cruel, Elena. You're destroying your son's chance at a future home because of a stupid wedding." The complete lack of remorse, the sheer entitlement, solidified my cold resolve. They still didn't understand. They thought the problem was the money. I needed to make them understand the true, irreparable damage they had done to trust and reputation. I knew I couldn't just lash out. Revenge that is driven by raw emotion is messy and often backfires. If I was going to retaliate, it needed to be precise, devastating, and entirely focused on exposing the integrity they had so carelessly discarded. I needed to seek justice, not just anger. The strategy, hitting the core of their deceit. I began to plan. My target wasn't just to make them financially uncomfortable, it was to expose the truth to the small, tight-knit community of friends, coworkers, and relatives they had sworn to secrecy and who, I realized, were also victims of their manipulative facade. If Chloe and Marcus were willing to lie to their mother about a wedding, what else were they capable of hiding? My plan had 3 key components, targeting the 3 things they valued most: their reputation, their network, and their financial ambition. 1. The public reveal. I needed to make the betrayal public knowledge, not through angry rants, but through irrefutable, factual evidence. The photos and the invoice I had retrieved from Marcus's laptop were gold. I would use the digital trail they created to expose the perfect lie. I decided to send out an official, beautifully worded announcement, one that would be impossible to ignore or deny. 2. The financial blockade. They had lied to get the money for the house. Now that they knew the money was gone, they would undoubtedly turn to other family members or close friends for loans, spinning a dramatic story about the cruel, old mother who took back her promise. I needed to ensure my side of the story, the undeniable, documented truth, reached every potential lender or sympathetic ear before they did. Their financial reputation had to be destroyed. 3. Marcus's responsibility. I needed to send a clear message to my son: while my love for him might be eternal, my respect and trust were entirely conditional. His silence had been his weapon against me, and now, my silence regarding his needs would become my weapon against him. The final move would not just be about Chloe, it would be about forcing Marcus to truly look at the consequences of his complicity. I spent the next week meticulously crafting the narrative. I wrote and rewrote the text of the announcement, ensuring every word was calm, factual, and deeply heartbreaking. I didn't use harsh terms like kill or hate, I used words that carried a heavier weight: destroyed, trust, integrity, exposed. The tone had to be cinematic and dramatic, perfectly suited for the story channel they had forced me to live through. I realized that by excluding me from their ceremony, they had created an opening. They had defined my role as an outsider. Now, as an outsider, I was free from the social obligations of silence and politeness. I was free to tell the real story of their wedding. The planning was my therapy. It channeled the crushing weight of rejection into a determined, focused energy. The sweet, loving mother they had deceived was gone. In her place was a woman who was about to give them exactly what they earned: a public, undeniable reckoning for the price of their lies. The final piece of the plan was ready. I just needed the right moment, the moment when the impact would be most dramatic and impossible for them to escape. I was about to make an announcement that would not only confirm my son's marriage but would also permanently shut down their carefully constructed, perfect world of secrets. Revenge, when properly executed, is not a scream, it's a carefully placed microphone. I needed the world they valued, their small, professional circle, the friends they lied to, and the family they excluded, to hear the truth, not from a tearful mother, but from an undeniable source. I needed to use their own chosen medium of communication against them. For the next few days, I acted normally. I called my sister, Marcus's aunt, and casually mentioned how quiet things were on the wedding front. I let the silence hang, nurturing the unease. I was setting the stage, ensuring that when the news broke, it wouldn't be dismissed as a misunderstanding, but recognized immediately as a scandal. My revenge began with a single, perfectly crafted social media post. I chose the platform where Chloe was most active, the one she used to project her image of domestic bliss and professional success. I used my own, rarely updated profile, the profile of the loving, supportive mother, to ensure maximum shock value. The post was designed to look like a delayed, deeply heartfelt celebration. I didn't announce their wedding, I celebrated the truth that had been hidden. I began by uploading the most beautiful, high-resolution photo I had secretly taken from Marcus's laptop, the shot of Chloe and Marcus laughing joyously on the coast, the official, elegant picture of their private ceremony. Then came the text, a dramatic, cinematic piece of writing that sounded like a congratulatory message, but was, in fact, a measured, crushing indictment. To my dearest Marcus and Chloe, after a wonderful few weeks processing the incredible news, I can finally share this beautiful moment with all our family and friends. While I was initially shocked to learn, over breakfast last week, that you had already exchanged vows 2 days prior, on October 14th, at a beautiful, private coastal ceremony, my heart is now full of bittersweet acceptance. I paused there, checking the post multiple times before sending. The genius of the first paragraph was its triple punch: acceptance, shock, and the irrefutable date. It sounded like a mother grappling with the surprise, while simultaneously broadcasting the core facts: they got married. They lied to me. I found out later. I continued, ensuring I addressed the exact people they had lied to, the ones who had already been sworn to secrecy. I know many of you, especially our close circle, may have been surprised by the sudden secrecy surrounding this commitment. I understand that the young couple wanted to handle their special day without the pressure of a big event. I want to assure everyone that this stunning photo is indeed from their actual wedding ceremony, which was beautifully planned over the last 6 months, and not the future vow renewal party we were discussing. The word 6 months was the crucial trigger. It established the calculation of the deceit. The phrase vow renewal party was a direct preemptive strike against the lie Chloe had tried to feed me in my kitchen, immediately exposing their flimsy cover story to anyone who might have heard it. And then, the final, devastating blow, a reference to the financial betrayal, cloaked in motherly pride. I wish them a future built on honesty and mutual respect. As a mother, I have always wanted them to be secure, and I am so happy that the substantial funds I had set aside for their large, hypothetical wedding could instead be immediately reinvested into a fund that will guarantee my own future stability. I believe every parent should ensure their security before enabling the ambitions of those who demonstrate a profound lack of respect for the truth. Wishing Marcus and Chloe a future where integrity guides their every decision. With love, Elena. I hit post. The clock started ticking. The immediate fallout. The post went viral within their network almost instantly. It wasn't hate mail, it was an elegantly framed notification of deceit, delivered with a smile and a bank statement reference. The comments section was initially silent, then exploded. Friends who had been at the wedding were caught in the crossfire. They couldn't confirm, they couldn't deny. They could only look at the photo and see their own faces reflected in the background, proof of their shared secret. The family was in utter shock. My sister called me minutes later, her voice tight with confusion and anger. "Elena, what is this? I thought they were just planning. You knew about this 6 months ago?" "No, I didn't know," I clarified, my voice sounding exhausted but firm. "That's the point, darling. They booked it 6 months ago. They told me last week, after the fact. They let me keep planning so I wouldn't pull the money. My sister was left speechless. And that was the reaction I needed, shock leading to judgment. Chloe and Marcus were at work when the post went live. Marcus called me first, his voice shaking with pure, unadulterated panic. "Mom! What did you do? Take that down right now. You can't post that photo. You're destroying everything." "Destroying what, Marcus?" I asked, my voice calm. "The lie? I'm simply sharing the truth of your wedding, which you celebrated without me. I'm providing clarity to all the people you misled. But the part about the money, the fund, you made it sound like..." "I made it sound exactly like the truth," I interrupted. "You betrayed my trust for financial gain. I retaliated by prioritizing my own financial security. It's an equal exchange, Marcus. You wanted a marriage built on secrecy, you now have a public reputation built on that same secrecy. Your friends and colleagues now know you are capable of lying to the woman who raised you, over a check. What does that say about your professional integrity?" I hung up before he could respond. The trap was sprung. The execution of the revenge was not about violence or destruction, it was about public exposure and the irreversible damage to their carefully constructed social capital. They had used their wedding to isolate me, I used their wedding photo to isolate them. The grand announcement wasn't the end. It was the devastating opening act to the climax, where the consequences of their public reputation would truly begin to cost them everything they thought they had secured. My post was not an emotional outburst, it was a detonation. The reaction was swift, seismic, and perfectly targeted. Marcus and Chloe had built their lives on an image of competence, honesty, and professional success. They had sworn friends to secrecy, but they couldn't control the narrative once the truth was leaked by the one person they had deliberately underestimated. The fallout began immediately in the one place they couldn't afford a scandal, Chloe's workplace. Chloe worked in finance, a world built on trust and ethical behavior. Her reputation for integrity was everything. Within 24 hours of my post going live, the carefully worded bittersweet acceptance I had delivered was circulating among her colleagues. They didn't just see a family drama, they saw a woman who was willing to lie systematically, for months, to secure money, and who had coerced her partner into maintaining the charade. I received a discreet call from a friend of a friend who worked in the same building. The news was devastating for Chloe. The firm wasn't interested in personal disputes, but they were deeply concerned about misrepresentation and deceit. If Chloe was capable of such cold, calculated lying to her family for financial gain, what was she capable of doing to clients? The foundation of their trust in her was utterly destroyed. The public reckoning intensified when Marcus's side of the family started calling him. His favorite aunt, the one he had always relied on, was furious. Not at me, but at him. "Marcus, how could you let your mother plan a wedding that you knew was already done? You allowed her to invest her heart in a lie. I am so disappointed. We won't be discussing any financial help for the house, not until you address the lack of honesty in your marriage." The financial blockade was working perfectly. They had intended to spin a story of a cruel mother cutting them off, but my post had preemptively established the truth. The funds were removed because the trust was broken, not out of malice. Every door they intended to knock on, family, close friends, was now shut, slammed closed by the undeniable evidence of their 6-month deception. The final showdown. The climax came that evening when they showed up at my house unannounced. This wasn't a polite visit, it was a desperate invasion. They hammered on the door, frantic and enraged. I opened the door and stood calmly in the threshold, watching them. Their faces were haggard, stripped of their usual polish. Chloe looked wild, her composure shattered. "You absolute monster, Elena!" Chloe shrieked, her voice shaking. "You've ruined me. My supervisor called me in. They think I'm a risk. My career. Your career is being destroyed by your own lack of integrity, Chloe, not by my post, I replied, my voice dangerously even. The truth is ruining you. If you hadn't lied for 6 months, if you hadn't planned a secret wedding while pretending to take my money, there would be nothing for me to post. Marcus stepped forward, his eyes pleading, but his tone accusatory. Mom, this is cruel. This is not you. This is too far. The money, the house, the job, you're shutting down our entire life. I am simply reflecting your life back to you, Marcus, I said, meeting his gaze for the first time with cold pity. You told me you valued secrecy over honesty. You chose to exclude me. You chose to treat me as a walking wallet. You destroyed the foundation of our relationship, and now you are facing the consequences of having sacrificed loyalty for a temporary convenience. Chloe suddenly went silent, her expression shifting from rage to something terrifyingly cold. She stepped closer to Marcus, possessively, and then delivered the final, venomous blow that confirmed her nature. Fine. Keep your money. You know what, Elena? We didn't want you at the wedding because you're tiring. You're too much. We wanted to start our life without your constant involvement. We just didn't think you'd be such a petty, vindictive old woman about it. That phrase, old woman, spoken with such deep contempt, was the final, defining moment. It was the confirmation that her motive wasn't about pressure or simplicity. It was pure, unadulterated disrespect and a desire to completely marginalize me. I looked at my son, standing shoulder to shoulder with the woman who had just publicly stripped me of my dignity, and I knew that whatever hope I had for reconciliation was officially gone. He didn't defend me. He just stood there, silently accepting her cruelty. Your contempt is duly noted, Chloe, I said quietly, the pain in my heart turning into a solid, impenetrable wall. And your true character is now fully exposed to the world you care about. Your marriage may be legally sound, but the entire life you built around it is now broken. I didn't need to say anything more. The sight of their destroyed composure, the public shame they were enduring, and the irreversible damage to their financial stability was the complete fulfillment of my need for justice. I slowly closed the door on them, leaving them standing there, shouting into the silence. The climax wasn't a physical fight, it was a profound emotional reckoning where the betrayal was fully accounted for. They had lost their reputation, their financial leverage, and, most importantly, the one person whose unwavering love they had taken for granted. The secrets were out, and the cost was everything. The storm had passed, leaving behind a chilling, absolute silence. After that final, volatile showdown on my doorstep, Marcus and Chloe disappeared from my immediate orbit. The public reckoning had achieved its goal. It had exposed the cost of their deceit, not just to me, but to their wider world. The days that followed were filled with a profound sense of solitude. The initial rush of righteous anger had faded, and what remained was the heavy reality of a severed bond. I had my justice. I had my financial security back, invested firmly in my own future. But I had lost my son. Chloe's career was severely compromised. While she wasn't fired, the internal trust was gone. She was sidelined, taken off major accounts, and forced to endure the cold judgment of her peers. Her professional ambitions, which she had prioritized over common decency, were permanently shattered. She learned the hard way that integrity is not a disposable asset, it is the currency of a responsible adult life. Marcus's situation was more tragic. He had lost his mother's unconditional trust and the support of his extended family. He was trapped in a marriage that had cost him his most fundamental relationship, and he was forced to watch his wife blame me for the consequences of her choices. He had exchanged a temporary difficulty, telling his mother the truth, for a lifetime of awkward silences and irreparable damage. He had made his bed, and now he had to lie in the cold sheets of his own cowardice. I often thought about the wedding day they had stolen from me. The joyous occasion I had envisioned was replaced by a secret, hasty affair, and now, that secret itself had destroyed the happiness they had hoped to secure. They wanted simplicity, but they created a catastrophe. They wanted independence, but they ended up utterly isolated. The resolution, a new foundation. The resolution for me wasn't a triumphant victory lap, it was the quiet, determined act of rebuilding my own life. I took the money that had been designated for their wedding and used it to secure a beautiful, smaller home for myself, a place I had always dreamed of, near the coast, the very location they had chosen for their secret ceremony. It was a reclaiming of that scenery, that beauty, for myself. I didn't hear from them for months, and I didn't reach out. I realized that my love for Marcus was unconditional, but my presence in his life had to be conditional on his respect. I decided that the next move, if there ever was one, had to come from him. He had to be the one to admit the betrayal, not just the mistake. One quiet afternoon, months later, I received a simple letter, not an email, not a text, a handwritten letter from Marcus. It was clumsy, filled with crossed-out words, but it contained the one thing I had been waiting for: accountability. He wrote that he finally understood the true depth of the betrayal. He apologized not for hurting my feelings, but for disrespecting my love and for allowing Chloe to treat me as a nuisance. He acknowledged that the loss of trust was entirely his doing, and that he understood why the money was gone. The letter was a small crack in the wall of silence, but I knew it was not a foundation for the full relationship we once shared. I wrote him back one short sentence: "I am grateful for your honesty, Marcus. I will always love you, but trust is something that can only be earned back, piece by piece." The moral undertone, the cost of deceit. The final lesson of this long, painful saga is simple, yet profound. This story wasn't about a wedding, or money, or even just family drama. It was a dramatic illustration of the true cost of deceit. The moral of the story: when you build your happiness on a foundation of lies and conscious exclusion, that structure is inherently unstable. Marcus and Chloe prioritized the convenience of a secret over the integrity of their relationships. They thought they could manipulate the most powerful, selfless love in the world, a mother's love, and face no consequences. They were wrong. What they gained in a hasty, simple ceremony, they lost in reputation, trust, and familial bond. They learned that there is no greater destruction than the one you inflict upon your own name. The biggest price they paid wasn't financial, it was the permanent, chilling solitude that comes from realizing you have purposefully isolated yourself from the people who mattered most. The dream of the grand family wedding was destroyed, but in its place, I built something far more valuable: a secure, honest future built only on the love that remains and the hard-won wisdom that sometimes, the only way to get justice is to let the complete truth be the ultimate weapon.